"She's not really grasping it, Mr. Sterling," my son David said, not even bothering to lower his voice. "We'll just go over the key points slowly, won't we, Mom?" He turned to me then, his smile a brittle mask, the kind he wore when negotiating with difficult clients. I was sitting right there, a few feet from him, across the polished mahogany table in Mr. Sterling's office. But in his mind, I suppose I was already a ghost, a figurehead whose signature was the only thing of value left. I looked at the heavy silver pen lying on the legal pad. My hand reached for it, slowly, deliberately, not for support, not to steady myself, but because I knew exactly what I was about to do. "Actually," I said, turning my gaze to the young lawyer, Mr. Sterling, who looked as uncomfortable as a cat in a dog park, "if it's quite all right, I'd prefer to review the terms myself." Cameron Sterling, a man barely out of law school, blinked, then nodded, adjusting his tie. "Of course, Mrs. Vance, the draft is right here." David shifted in his expensive leather chair, exhaling sharply. His wife, Brenda, sitting beside him, simply raised an eyebrow, her perfectly sculpted nail tapping impatiently on the armrest. "I just thought it would be simpler, Eleanor," David began, using my first name, a subtle shift in formality that always grated. "You know, less technical. I could summarize the main points." I didn't look at him. I adjusted my reading glasses and leaned closer to the document. The room was hushed, opulent, designed to convey authority and demand compliance. Heavy velvet drapes, muted lighting, not a place for dissent. Exactly why David had chosen it. The document was a standard revocable trust, designating my lakeside cottage, the one Harold and I had built with our own hands, as the primary asset. Upon my passing, or declaration of mental incapacity, it would transfer directly to David, bypassing probate. That was the purpose of today's meeting, to finalize the paperwork. "Why is there a clause about mental incapacity?" I asked, still reading. "It's standard, Mom," Brenda cut in, her voice smooth as silk, but with an underlying steel. "Just a precaution, in case you become confused or—" She trailed off, not needing to finish the thought. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "It's a common provision, Mrs. Vance. It ensures the beneficiary can act swiftly if the grantor is no longer able to manage their affairs." I nodded. "And who decides I'm no longer able?" The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "Well," David began, his voice a touch too loud, "the trust designates me as the agent, so I'd work with a physician to have me declared incompetent." I finished for him, my voice calm, almost a whisper. "Only if." "Mom, don't be dramatic," David snapped, his composure finally cracking. I closed the folder gently and looked at him. Really looked. His perfectly coiffed hair, his expensive watch, a gift from me. His manicured hands, never calloused by real work. All the signs of someone who'd come to collect, not to care. "You know, Harold and I poured the foundation for that cottage ourselves," I said, my voice distant, remembering. "We slept on air mattresses in the unfinished living room, listening to the loons on the lake. There was no air conditioning back then, just open windows and the scent of pine and mosquito repellent." David offered a polite, practiced smile. "I know, Mom. You've told me." But I wasn't telling him this time. I was reminding myself. "I planted those wild roses by the porch. Chloe, your daughter, she was 6. She helped me dig the holes. She cried when we pruned the old lilac bush. said it felt like hurting something. David's face tightened, just a fraction. He didn't remember, or he didn't want to. And now you want me to sign over that cottage like it's a transfer at the DMV. A folder, a signature, a click. Brenda let out a short, nervous laugh, the one she used when she didn't want to argue but couldn't appear weak. Oh, Eleanor, don't make this emotional. It's a legal formality. You'll still live there, of course. Until you decide I'm confused. Mr. Sterling shifted again. I turned to him. May I see the alternate draft? The one without the incapacity clause? He blinked. Well, yes, we did prepare one as a contingency. I can print it. Please do. David leaned forward, his voice still even, but with a hint of strain. Mom, you're not thinking this through. You've always said you wanted me to have the cottage. This is just a way to avoid taxes and paperwork later. Yes, I said, but I don't recall saying you should get it while I'm still breathing. He flinched, just for a second, then recovered. I looked back down at the draft. I understand everything, David, and I know what this is. You're planning for a future where I'm quiet, out of the way, and no longer making decisions. But that future isn't here yet. The lawyer returned with the alternate draft. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I'll sign this one. David started to protest, but I raised my hand. You may be used to clients who nod and smile and do what they're told. I'm not one of them. I signed my name slowly, clearly, then handed the document back to Mr. Sterling. The room was silent. I appreciate your help, I said to him. Then I turned to my son and his wife. As for you two, we'll talk, but not here, not like this. And I walked out first. The silence in my old sedan was heavier than the noise I'd left behind. I sat for a while before turning the key. My hands rested on the steering wheel, unmoving. I didn't cry, not from pride, just from sheer exhaustion. You get to a certain age, and even your bones feel every word people throw at you. She's not really grasping it. I'd been repeating that line to myself all the way from the lawyer's office to my driveway. I'd heard it before, not in those exact words, but in tone, in glances, in the way people talk around you instead of to you. It starts quietly. They speak slower, explain things you already know. Then they start deciding for you. Then they stop involving you altogether. And one day, you realize they think you're already half gone. I parked in front of my house, the one David was so eager to sign off on. Pale brick, old shutters in need of paint, the wild roses still standing guard out front. I never did like how the brick faded with age, but now I appreciated it. It had earned its wrinkles. So had I. Inside, the air was still. I'd left the curtains open, so the afternoon light fell onto Harold's old armchair, exactly where he used to nap after Sunday breakfast. I stood in the doorway for a long time before taking off my shoes. The quiet was familiar, but today it pressed in differently, like the silence of a courtroom after a verdict you didn't ask for. The kitchen smelled faintly of vanilla. I'd baked a small batch of shortbread the night before. No one had eaten them. I rarely ate sweets anymore, but I liked the ritual. It made the house feel less empty. I made tea without thinking. Water, kettle, the same chipped mug with the bluebird rim. I didn't sit at the table. I stood, leaning slightly on the counter, looking out at the backyard. The grass was too high. I'd meant to call Leo, David's son, a neighborhood boy, to mow it. The same boy who used to shovel my walkway in winter, but he hadn't come by this season. They disappear eventually. The helpers, the check-ins, the thoughtful gestures. You become part of the background, a quiet house with drawn curtains, a name on a Christmas card, a story told over drinks. My mother's still in that place, you know. We try to visit when we can. Try. That word carries so much weight when people don't want to say no. I carried my tea into the living room and sat in Harold's chair. It creaked beneath me. He always said it would collapse one day, and I always told him I hoped it wouldn't happen with him in it. He'd chuckle, rub his knees, and promise to reinforce it. He never did. I closed my eyes for a moment. I imagined he was still here, upstairs maybe, folding laundry badly, humming off key, or out back, pretending to fix something just to avoid doing the dishes. I used to get mad about that. Now I'd give anything to hear that old wrench drop on the porch one more time. I opened my eyes and looked across the room. The mantel held 3 photographs. One of Harold and me at our 50th anniversary, one of David in his graduation gown, and one of Chloe, my granddaughter as a child, holding a watering can twice her size, grinning at the sunflowers. Chloe, sweet, distractible, always running late. Chloe, the only one who still showed up without an agenda. She stopped by just last week, bringing coffee and that almond croissant I can't seem to find anywhere else. She talked too fast as always, hands flying, updating me on her coursework and her new part-time job. She didn't stay long, but she kissed my cheek on the way out and said, "Love you, Grandma. Don't let Mom and Dad drive you nuts." I chuckled, remembering it was Chloe who still asked how I slept, who noticed when my coat was buttoned wrong, who helped me change a light bulb without filming it for social media. That girl had inherited my stubbornness, not David's polish, and God bless her for it. I set the empty mug down and stood. My knees ached. They always did in the late afternoon, but I moved slowly to the antique writing desk in the hallway. I opened the bottom drawer, the one Harold had always called your fortress. Inside, envelopes, statements, the deed to the house, my insurance papers, everything they'd tried to make decisions about without me. I took it all out and laid it on the dining room table. Then I added one more item, a small, leather-bound journal, barely used. I opened the first page and wrote in clear cursive, "People think age makes you weak, but I've never felt clearer." Then I made a list. Call Mr. Sterling. Request revised trust documents. Done. Review house deed. List all monthly transfers to David and his family. Call the bank. Block automatic payments. Schedule meeting with financial advisor. Write letter to Chloe. I underlined the last one twice. I didn't know what the next step would be exactly, but I knew this. I wasn't going to wait in my own house for someone to quietly erase me from my life. I'd fought too hard to keep it, built too much, endured more than David would ever guess. The pen was still in my bag from the lawyer's office. I took it out and placed it beside the journal. "I'm not done," I whispered to no one. And this time, I meant it. There was a time when David used to ask me to read him stories. He'd sit on the floor, little head resting against my knee, chattering about spaceships and dragons and faraway lands. He loved adventure stories back then. I'd pretend I didn't know how the hero would escape, even when the plot was obvious halfway through. Now I can't remember the last time He looked at me without a calculation in his eyes. I stood in front of the hallway mirror, fixing the collar of my favorite linen blouse. I was going to the local market, nothing more ambitious than that, but I wanted to look like someone who had somewhere to be, someone who wasn't fading into the furniture. The blouse was a soft lavender. Harold once told me it made my eyes look brighter. Outside, the air was crisp. October always feels like a trick, summer's warmth lingering on the skin, but something colder already tucked beneath it. I walked slowly down the porch steps. They creaked. David had complained about them last year. "We should replace those before you trip, Mom," he'd said. "I'll get someone out here." He never did. They're still standing. The market wasn't far, and the walk helped. My joints loosened, my breath evened. Familiar faces passed me by, most too young to recognize me, a few offering polite nods. Mrs. Henderson, from 2 houses down, waved from her mailbox. We hadn't spoken properly in years, just once after Harold died. She brought over a casserole, never stayed. Inside the market, the young clerk barely looked up from his phone. I picked up tea, almond milk, and a single ripe pear. I didn't need more. These days, I buy for one, and I hate throwing food out. At the register, I asked for paper instead of plastic. The boy looked surprised, as if no one had done that in years. "Going green, huh?" he said. "No," I replied. "Just old." He laughed, not unkindly. As I stepped outside, I saw a sleek black SUV pull up. I recognized it instantly. David's car. He must have sent Brenda for something, or perhaps she was running errands nearby. But then I saw the passenger door open. Brenda stepped out. Her heels clicked on the pavement, crisp and practiced. She wore oversized sunglasses, though the sky was clouded. I watched her walk, tall, efficient, moving like she belonged everywhere. Then she saw me. For a split second, her steps slowed. Then the smile came, the one she used on clients, the one that didn't reach her eyes. "Eleanor," she said, as if surprised, though we both knew she wasn't. "Out for a stroll." I held up the paper bag. "Milk and a pear." She nodded, then gestured back at the car. "We were just heading to that new bistro on Oak Street. Have you tried it?" I shook my head. She hesitated, then added, "They do amazing Bellinis. You'd love it." I didn't answer. Instead, I adjusted the bag in my hands. "I was going to call you," she said quickly, "to follow up on the paperwork, just to, clarify." I met her eyes. I made my decision. Brenda shifted her weight, trying to remain casual. "It's your right, of course. I just hope you're not making choices out of fear." "Fear?" I raised an eyebrow. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Sometimes older people make impulsive decisions because they think everyone's trying to take advantage. But, Eleanor, I'm your daughter-in-law. I'm not..." "Not what?" I asked quietly. "Not interested in your property, not concerned with control." Her smile faltered. "That's not fair." "I agree," I said. "It's not fair to be talked over, dismissed, signed off like a task on a spreadsheet." She exhaled, frustrated. "You're being emotional, and you're being cold." For a moment, neither of us spoke. David stayed in the car, probably watching, pretending to fiddle with the radio. "I was trying to help," she said, softer now. "No," I corrected her. "You were trying to manage me, and that's not the same." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I stepped closer, placing the paper bag gently in the crook of my arm. "I may be old, Brenda, but I'm not gone." and I'm not your project." She blinked, then looked away. "Tell David to check the porch steps," I added. He promised Harold he'd fix them. And with that, I walked past her down the sidewalk, the paper bag swinging softly at my side. I didn't look back. Somewhere behind me, I thought I heard her say, "Eleanor," but I kept walking. She came without warning, as she always did. Chloe never called ahead, never asked if it was a good time. She just showed up with coffee, with noise, with questions, and I was always glad she did. I heard the car door slam first, then the familiar clatter of sneakers on the path. She didn't walk. She bounced. The screen door opened with that crooked squeal it's had since Harold tried to oil the hinges with dish soap. "Grandma," she called. "In the kitchen," I answered. Chloe appeared, pink-cheeked from the wind, holding a to-go tray with 2 lattes. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that messy bun she pretended was effortless. It never was. "You look good," she said, setting down the drinks, "like you just told someone off." I raised an eyebrow. "I did. Your mother," she snorted. "Excellent." Chloe had always been a strange hybrid. David's daughter, yes, but with none of her parents' sharp edges. There was warmth in her and curiosity. She didn't treat me like an exhibit in a museum or a problem to be solved. When she was little, she used to crawl into my lap and ask me what things were like in the olden days. She still did sometimes, just with more sarcasm. She unpacked a paper bag. "I brought blueberry muffins. You like blueberry, right?" I smiled. "Only when it's real blueberry. This is the real deal, not that artificial purple stuff." She poured the coffee into 2 mugs without asking, sat down at the table, bit into a muffin, and groaned theatrically. "So," she said with her mouth full, "what did you tell Mom?" "That I'm not her project." Chloe choked on a crumb, swallowed, and grinned. "God, I wish I'd been there." I didn't answer. I watched her eat. She reminded me of someone, not David. No, not even as a child. There was something of Harold in her, not in looks, but in timing. The way she paused before saying something honest. The way her face softened when she was listening. She looked up and caught me staring. "What?" "You look like your grandfather when you chew." "Do I?" she asked, amused. I nodded. "Only prettier." She smiled, then got quiet. "Grandma, is everything okay? Really?" I hesitated, not because I wanted to lie, but because I didn't want to make her carry the weight of things too soon. "I'm tired," I said honestly. "Not of life, just of pretending not to notice what people think of me." She didn't interrupt. She just listened. "I went to sign a trust agreement," I continued. "Your mother arranged it, said it would make things easier, but it was clear what she meant. She wants the cottage." Chloe tilted her head. "Soon enough." The papers were drawn so that she could take over if I was ever mentally unfit. She winced. "That's disgusting." "It's legal," I said. "That's what makes it worse." She reached for my hand and squeezed it. Her fingers were warm, real. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked at her, long and steady. "I'm going to change everything." Her eyes widened. "I'm going to talk to the bank. I'm going to talk to my lawyer, and I'm going to make sure that when I'm no longer here, the person who cared is the one who will have something to remember me by." Chloe blinked. "Wait, Grandma. No, I didn't mean—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "I never wanted to be a burden," I continued. "But I won't be manipulated either. Your mother treats me like a stepping stone. You treat me like a person." Chloe wiped at her eye with the sleeve of her sweater. I'm just being decent these days, I said. That's rare enough. We finished our coffee in silence. Not the heavy kind, the peaceful kind. I felt more awake than I had in weeks. Before she left, she stood by the door, fiddling with her keys. You don't have to do anything because of me. I know, I said, but I'm doing it anyway. She hugged me tightly. You're kind of a badass. You know that? No, I replied. Just a tired woman with a good memory. Then she was gone, and the house was quiet again. But this time it didn't feel empty. I found out about the anniversary cruise from the woman who walks her poodle past my house every morning. Not from David, not from Chloe, from Mrs. Henderson, who always wears sensible walking shoes and carries a plastic bag full of neighborhood news. They're leaving for the Caribbean next Saturday, she said casually, as if we'd been discussing mutual friends and not my own family. Saw your son loading luggage into the back of that fancy SUV of his. Heard it's his 25th anniversary, a big family celebration. Real fancy. I stood there in my gardening gloves, holding the trowel I'd forgotten I was using. I hadn't heard, I said, as evenly as I could manage. Mrs. Henderson squinted at me. You're not going? They must have forgotten to mention it. She blinked, then realizing what she'd stepped into, faked a cough and tugged the leash. Well, people are so busy these days. I'm sure it's just a mix-up. Sure, a mix-up. After she walked off, I stood in the garden for a long time, staring at the lavender bush that had grown wild without Harold to trim it. I tried to feel angry. I tried to feel shocked. But the truth was, I didn't feel either. I felt expected, because this was how it worked. Now I was convenient when they needed something, a signature, a check, a story for the family tree. But when there were real celebrations, when there were cameras and catered food and new dresses, I was quietly erased. I walked back into the house, left the trowel on the kitchen counter, and sat at the table. They hadn't even tried to lie this time. No call saying, we're keeping it small. No polite excuse about capacity. Just silence, as if I wouldn't notice, as if I wouldn't matter. They think I'll just stay home. They think I'll make a pot of tea and knit myself into forgetfulness. Not this time. I stood up and went to the writing desk. I pulled out my journal and added a line to the list. 7. Find something to wear. If they were going to pretend I didn't exist, I'd remind them, quietly, precisely, and in person. I opened my closet and stared at the row of clothes. Most of them were practical. Sweaters, long skirts, the kind of thing you wear when no one's watching. But in the back, wrapped in plastic, was the emerald green dress I wore to Harold's retirement party. I hadn't touched it in years. I slipped it off the hanger and held it up. It still looked dignified, still carried the scent of the cedar sachets I kept in the closet. I laid it on the bed and fetched the sapphire earrings he gave me on our 40th anniversary. I set them beside the dress like an old ritual. That night, I took my time. I bathed. I trimmed my nails. I ironed the dress and lined up the shoes. I didn't know if I'd walk through their front door or simply stand on the sidewalk. I just knew I needed to be visible. They weren't going to hide me this time. The morning of the dinner, I ate toast and read the newspaper, pretending I was calm. But my hands betrayed me, the way they gripped the mug, the way they hovered over the pages without turning them. At noon, I called Chloe. She answered on the second ring. Grandma, I heard about the cruise dinner. There was silence. "I was going to tell you when—" She didn't answer. "Are you going?" I asked. "Yes," she said quietly. "Then I'll see you there." Another pause. "You're coming." "I am." More silence. "I'll save you a seat," she said finally. "You won't have to," I replied. "I'll make my own space." We hung up and I went back to my list. One last thing to write. 8. Let them see you. Let them really see you. At 6:30, I stood at my front door, dressed and ready. The evening light made the wild roses glow. I looked at the house behind me. Every window, every memory, every inch of it built with hands they'd forgotten were mine. Then I walked down the steps. They creaked, just like always. I hadn't worn the sapphires in 12 years, not since Harold's funeral. I'd told myself I was saving them for something meaningful, though nothing had felt quite right since he left. But that night, as I fastened them in front of the mirror, I realized this was meaningful. Not for them, for me. The drive was short. They only lived 15 minutes away, in one of those newer subdivisions with identical mailboxes and clean sidewalks. Their house stood out, of course, bigger, wider, grander. Brenda liked order, symmetry, the illusion of perfection. I parked a little down the street, not wanting to make a scene. I sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. Through the windshield, I saw cars lined up, guests laughing as they walked to the door, women in heels carrying gifts, men in crisp shirts adjusting their ties. Not one of them knew that David's mother wasn't on the guest list. Not one of them knew that the woman who raised him, who taught him to spell his name and tie his shoes and read him stories, was watching from a distance, like a stranger. I opened the car door. Let them see me. The porch light was already on when I reached their front steps. Music drifted through the windows, soft jazz, meant to sound elegant, laughter, clinking glasses, the comfortable noise of people who believe everything's in its place. I rang the bell. The door opened a moment later. It wasn't David. It was Leo, his son. He looked surprised, then quickly neutral. "Grandma Eleanor," he said, using my full name like a polite stranger. "We weren't expecting—" "I know," I said, stepping past him. I heard him exhale sharply, but didn't turn around. The hallway was warm, filled with smells of catered food and someone's too strong cologne. I walked slowly, steadily into the living room. There they were. David standing near the fireplace, holding a champagne flute, laughing with someone I didn't know. Chloe seated at the corner of the couch, eyes already on me. And people, so many people, dressed well, smiling, comfortable, all part of the picture Brenda had curated. The music didn't stop, but the room quieted just a little. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't need to. David turned and saw me. His smile faltered. "Mom," he said, too brightly, stepping forward. We thought you weren't. You thought I wouldn't find out," I corrected, my voice clear. But I did. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Leo hovered near the doorway, unsure if he should intervene. David glanced around, then tried to laugh. "There must have been a miscommunication. I thought Chloe told you." "She didn't have to," I said. "Mrs. Henderson did. Red poodle, big mouth." A few people chuckled. David didn't. "I didn't come to make a scene," I said. "You don't have to worry." He forced a smile. "Of course not. You're welcome to stay." "I know," I said, "because I'm here." The room stilled again. Some guests turned back to to their drinks, politely pretending nothing was wrong. Others watched, curious. Chloe stood up, came to my side. "Grandma," she whispered, "do you want to sit?" "No," I replied softly. "I just wanted to see what I was missing." She looked at me with those eyes that still held warmth. I patted her hand gently. David cleared his throat. "Mom, why don't we go into the kitchen and talk?" "There's nothing left to discuss," I said, my voice low but sharp. "You made a choice. You chose to exclude me from your life, from your celebrations, from the image you wanted to present. That's not—" "You didn't forget me," I said. "You removed me. That's different." Someone dropped a fork. No one picked it up. I turned to Chloe. "I'll see you tomorrow, dear. We'll have tea. No catering, no speeches, just people who care." She nodded, eyes shining. Then I turned and walked back out the door. No one followed me, and I didn't look back. Harold used to say, "You never need to raise your voice if you're telling the truth." The next morning, the sky was pale and clear, the kind of early autumn light that slips through the curtains before you're ready for it. I sat by the window with my tea, watching a squirrel dig frantic little holes in the yard. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's dog barked. Life, as it does, carried on. I hadn't heard from David or Brenda. Not a message, not a call, not even a passive-aggressive email asking if I'd recovered from last night. I wasn't surprised. Cowards hide in silence, and my son was a master at professional avoidance. But at 9:17, the phone rang. The landline, the one no one under 40 calls anymore. I picked it up, expecting Chloe. "Mrs. Vance? Cameron Sterling here from the law office." His voice was smooth, cautious. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all, Mr. Sterling. I've been up since 6. "Ah," he said, chuckling nervously. "Well, I just wanted to follow up on your last visit. You mentioned wanting to revise the existing documents. I have your alternate trust draft here, and I'd be happy to schedule a time for finalization." I paused, letting my finger run along the rim of the teacup. "I'd like to do more than revise," I said. There was a moment of silence on the line. "All right," he said carefully. "What did you have in mind?" I told him. He didn't interrupt, not once. Just listened, typing, occasionally murmuring, "Understood, and yes, that's possible." By the end of the call, we had a plan, a legal one, precise, quiet, and utterly mine. As I hung up the phone, I felt something settle inside me. Not vengeance, not satisfaction, just the calm of finally acting in your own name. I spent the rest of the morning gathering papers. I opened the drawer where I kept all the family records, Harold's will, old tax returns, insurance documents. I handled them like photographs, each page a reminder of something built, something promised, something forgotten. Among them, I found a folder labeled Gifts, my handwriting from years ago. Inside, copies of checks, one for Chloe's college fund, one for David and Brenda's first down payment. Several marked reimbursement not required. At the time, I thought I was helping, strengthening family bonds, being a good mother. Now they read like receipts for respect never delivered. I packed everything into a neat leather satchel Harold once used when he visited the city for meetings. Still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and aftershave. At precisely 2:00, I walked into the law office. Cameron stood when I entered, startled again, as if old women weren't supposed to keep appointments. He led me into a private room, not the same one from before. This one had light, and no shadows in the corners. I took out the papers and handed them over. I want to create a new trust, I said, and a new will. Of course, he said. Who will be the primary beneficiary? I looked him straight in the eye. My granddaughter. He blinked. Chloe. Yes, and no one else. He hesitated. Would you like to explain the circumstances? No, I said, but I will say this. She's the only one who still knocks before she enters. That's all the reason I need. He nodded and began drafting. It took hours. We revised clauses, added protections, included contingencies. I didn't let fatigue cloud me. I read every line. When it was done, he handed me the pen. I signed not just the new trust, but myself back into my own story. When I stood to leave, Cameron said, You know, Mrs. Vance, it's rare. People your age taking charge like this. I'm not people, I said. I'm me. And I walked out with the afternoon sun on my face, my bag under my arm, and no more signatures left to surrender. The bank still smelled like disinfectant and cold air, the kind that settles in your bones and makes you question your memory. But I hadn't forgotten why I came. The clerk behind the counter was new, younger than Chloe, with nails like wet glass and an expression that flickered between efficiency and discomfort. I gave her my name, my ID, and a calm smile that I'd practiced in the mirror. She typed something into her computer. You're here about the automatic transfers. I'm here to stop them, I corrected gently. She hesitated, glancing at the screen. There are quite a few on record. We'd need a manager to authorize full suspension. Then fetch one, dear. I'll wait. She blinked, then rose and disappeared down a hallway. A few minutes later, a man appeared, tall, balding, with the polite weariness of someone used to dealing with grown adults who behave like children. He introduced himself as Andrew and led me into a private room with a table, a monitor, and a small, trembling fern. Mrs. Vance, he began, I understand you want to suspend all automatic payments. Not suspend, I said. Terminate permanently. He raised his eyebrows. We're talking about monthly transfers to your son's household, utilities, tuition support, a few lifestyle expenses. Lavish lifestyle expenses, I clarified. Spa memberships, vacation savings, dry cleaning subscriptions. I counted 17 charges that weren't even theirs. He cleared his throat. Would you like to explain the reason? No. He waited. When I didn't offer anything else, he nodded and began typing. It took longer than I thought. There were more entries than I remembered approving. Some were years old. Some had been updated with quiet increases. David hadn't just taken the help, he'd automated the taking. While Andrew worked, I stared at the little fern. One of the leaves had browned at the tip, curling inward like it was tired of trying. I knew the feeling. When he was done, he swiveled the monitor toward me. Here's a list of all outgoing transfers marked for deletion. Please review and initial here. I leaned in, scanned the list. $1,200 monthly to Shared Family Fund. $250 to Chloe's wellness account. Interesting. I hadn't known about that. A dozen smaller charges, cleverly named, but clear enough. David had been thorough. I signed. He printed confirmations. 3 sets. Would you like to notify the recipients yourself? No, I said. Let silence do the work. He nodded slowly. Anything else I can assist with? Yes, I said. I want to open a new account. Trust-based, beneficiary Chloe Vance. Conditions locked until age 30 or upon demonstration of financial hardship with written request. 2 co-signers, my lawyer and myself. He didn't flinch, just nodded again. Of course. By the time we finished, it was nearly 4 o'clock. The bank was quieter now, the post-lunch lull setting in. As Andrew walked me out, he held the door open and said, "Not many people take this kind of step. It takes clarity." "No," I said. "It takes being ignored one too many times." He nodded respectfully. "Well, good for you." I stepped out into the sunlight. The world looked the same. Dogs barked, tires hissed against the road, wind bent the tops of trees. But inside, something had shifted. The rope between me and David had always been invisible, a lifeline, a leash, a net. Today, I cut it, not to hurt him, to breathe again. The first call came that evening, just after dinner time, when people think the world is soft enough to deliver hard news. I let it ring. David didn't leave a voicemail. Of course not. He never liked recording anything he couldn't edit. The second call came an hour later. Then a third, this time from Brenda's number. I muted the phone and placed it face down on the table. Let them wonder. I washed the dishes slowly, without rush, like I had nothing urgent waiting. The kitchen light flickered once, an old bulb, nothing more. But it felt symbolic. I tightened the fixture gently, careful with my hands. I'd never been careless no matter what they said behind closed doors. When the landline rang, I answered. "Grandma," Chloe's voice tight, whispering, "I'm here, sweetheart." They know. Of course they do. She exhaled, clearly walking. I could hear her sneakers on concrete, wind catching her hair. I tried to tell Mom to calm down. She wouldn't listen. She said you'd lost your mind. I chuckled. She's wrong. I found it again. She's furious, Chloe continued. She was yelling about the money, the accounts, the trust. Dad was trying to. I interrupted gently. Did anyone ask why? There was a pause. No, just how? I nodded, though she couldn't see. That tells you everything you need to know. She stopped walking. Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine, Chloe. For the first time in a long while, I'm fine. I don't know what to do. You don't have to do anything, I said. You've already done enough. You showed up. You listened. She hesitated. They think I knew. Let them. Another pause. Grandma, they might come to the house. Let them. I hung up gently, not out of anger, but finality. 10 minutes later, headlights flicked across the window. I stood still, watching them through the curtain. Then the doorbell rang. One long, impatient chime. I didn't open. David tried next, knocked 3 times, sharp and measured. Eleanor, it's us. I said nothing. Then Brenda's voice. Mom, this is ridiculous. Can we please talk? I let the silence stretch. I know you're in there. Of course I was. More knocking, louder now. You're being unreasonable. This is family. I thought of every holiday I'd spent alone, every card that never came, every doctor's appointment I'd taken a cab to while they posted vacation photos from the Amalfi Coast. This isn't how we solve things, she called, not with lawyers. And yet, that's exactly how she tried to solve me. More silence, then at last, retreating footsteps. I exhaled slowly. My hands were steady. The phone vibrated again, later. A message, not a call. Mom, we need to talk. This isn't the way. I didn't reply, because finally, I wasn't speaking their language anymore. I was learning my own again. The next morning, I found a note shoved through the mail slot, folded 3 times, printed on expensive stationery, the kind David reserved for holiday cards and legal threats. The handwriting was Brenda's, sharp, efficient. Eleanor, I don't understand what you're trying to prove. We were only trying to protect you. Everything we've done has been out of love and concern. You've made some drastic decisions. We hope you'll reconsider. Brenda, no, I'm sorry. No, I see your side. Just concern masked as control, a demand for re-entry, not reconciliation. I didn't reply. Instead, I made a cup of tea and sat in Harold's chair, rereading the note, like a stranger trying to decipher the language of a distant country. I could see where she believed herself. That was the tragic part. Brenda had rewritten the story in her own mind so thoroughly that she believed it had always been this way. She wasn't malicious, just entitled, raised by love, and now insulted by its independence. Around noon, I took a walk, not far, just down the street, past the old bakery, through the park where Harold used to feed the pigeons. My knees protested, but I ignored them. I needed to move, to breathe in something unfiltered. At the pond, I sat on a bench and watched the water. Leaves drifted lazily across the surface, carried by the wind, not their own will. I wasn't going to be one of those leaves. Someone sat down beside me. I figured I'd find you here, Chloe said. I smiled. Still know me better than your mother. She didn't laugh, just sat quietly, elbows on her knees, watching the water with me. Everything's so tense at home, she said. It's like you threw a stone in a perfectly still pond, and now nobody knows how to swim. They weren't swimming, I said. They were floating, on my back. She didn't argue. Dad says you're punishing them. I raised an eyebrow. I'm protecting what's mine. Chloe turned to me, eyes searching. You really gave it all to me? I nodded, not out of revenge, out of recognition. She swallowed. It's too much. No, I said gently. It's just enough for someone who knocked on my door without needing a reason. She looked down at her hands. I don't want to lose them. You won't, but they may lose parts of you if they don't change. She didn't respond, and we let the silence stretch again, a good, kind silence. Before she left, I handed her an envelope. Not a check, not instructions, just a letter, handwritten, folded once. What is it? She asked. Read it when you get home. She hugged me then, long, tight, the way she used to as a child, after a nightmare. I love you, Grandma. I know, I said. That's why this works. When she was gone, I sat on the bench a little longer, watching the wind ripple the pond. David wanted calm, wanted control, but sometimes disruption is a kind of love too, the kind that shakes a tree hard enough for something new to grow. Let him be rattled. Let him wonder what happens next. I wasn't done yet. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. I heard them before I saw them, little fragments caught in conversations not meant for my ears. At the pharmacy. She cut them off, I heard, just like that. No, not everything, just the cottage and the money. Well, maybe everything. At the church social, Brenda looked like a ghost last Sunday, something about a trust fund given to the granddaughter. I always said Eleanor had more spine than she let on. Even Mrs. Henderson, red poodle and all, slowed her walk when she passed my house. She didn't wave, just lingered a moment too long, pretending to adjust the leash, as if waiting for me to come outside and confirm the story. I didn't let them talk. The story was theirs now, but the truth was still mine. What unsettled them wasn't the legal shift. It wasn't the revoked access or the frozen accounts. It was that I'd broken character. The quiet mother, the agreeable grandmother, the one who baked, nodded, paid. That version of me, the one they had all grown comfortable with, was gone. Or rather, I'd stood up and gently stepped out of her shadow. The next visitor wasn't David, not yet. It was his son, Leo. I hadn't seen him in months, not since he borrowed money for emergency car repairs, then posted concert photos on social media 3 days later. He stood on the porch like someone caught stealing apples, hands in his pockets, eyes down. I opened the door slowly. Leo. Hi, Grandma. I waited. He shuffled. Mind if I come in? That depends. He blinked. On what? On whether this is a visit or a performance. He flushed. A visit. I stepped aside, let him in, watched him look around like he expected the furniture to judge him. He sat at the edge of the couch, didn't take off his jacket, didn't ask for tea. Finally, he said, Mom and Dad are upset. I'm aware. They've never seen you like this, Ree. Neither have you. He looked up. Is it true about Chloe? Yeah. She's getting everything. She's receiving what was never owed to anyone but earned by someone. He exhaled through his nose. She's not even... she's younger. She doesn't need... I held up a hand. Stop before you say something you'll regret. He closed his mouth. I leaned forward, folding my hands. Leo, when was the last time you visited this house without needing something? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence answered for him. I've given more than money to this family, I said. I've given my time, my attention, my history, most of it dismissed, some of it exploited. He stared at the floor. I'm not angry, I added, but I'm no longer willing to fund my own invisibility. He looked up, and for the first time I saw something unguarded in him. Not guilt, not shame, just confusion. Is this forever? No, just finally. He nodded slowly. Okay. I stood. You can visit any time, you can sit, we can talk, but if you come with open hands instead of an open heart, the door won't open next time. He stood too. I understand. I walked him to the door. Before he stepped out, he turned. You look strong. I am, I said, and I always was. You're just now noticing. He nodded, then walked down the steps. The porch creaked behind him, that familiar, loyal sound. Still holding after all these years. I wrote the letter to Chloe at the dining room table in the late afternoon light, the kind of soft gold that makes even dust look gentle. I used the good paper, the kind Harold bought in bulk before everything became plastic and clicks. He believed some things were worth writing down with care. I wrote slowly. I didn't revise. This wasn't a performance. This was memory. This was blood. Chloe, I never wanted to make you choose, and I don't expect you to defend me. What I did wasn't about dividing the family. It was about finally drawing a line where none had been. I spent years confusing silence with love, endurance with grace. But endurance without recognition becomes erasure. I gave you the trust because you saw me, not because you needed something or because you flattered me. You asked questions no one else bothered with. Did I sleep well? Was I eating enough? Did I still hum when I gardened? Those things may seem small, but when someone's disappearing piece by piece, small things become lifelines. I am not leaving you a reward. I'm leaving you a reminder. That dignity is not something we ask for. It's something we keep. The house, the money, their symbols. They can be moved, sold, squandered. But if you hold on to one truth, let it be this: never become so efficient that you forget to be kind. If someday I'm no longer here and you find yourself at a table full of people speaking over you, remember this moment. Take the pen first. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and sealed it with a faint press of my thumb. Then I added her name in my old cursive, the one Brenda said looked too antique for modern life. I didn't send it. Not yet. I left it on the hallway table beside the phone, next to the little bowl of hard candy no one eats. But everyone remembers. That night, the wind picked up. I could hear it through the fireplace vent, whistling like a child with secrets. I wrapped myself in Harold's old cardigan and sat on the porch, watching the branches sway. There was something comforting in the way the trees moved. Not fighting the wind, just bending with it, resilient, but never passive. David hadn't tried to call again. Neither had Brenda. The silence had thickened into something almost ceremonial, like they were waiting for the next move, still hoping I'd flinch, that I'd undo the damage to their version of order. But I wasn't undoing anything. I was revealing. You reach a certain age, and people assume your story is winding down. What they don't realize is that some of us begin again with the clarity only survival gives. The next morning, I went to the notary's office, the same one I used after Harold passed. A kind woman with steady hands and a quiet mouth stamped the envelope that held the new trust papers. "Are you sure?" she asked. I've never been surer. As I left, she said, "It's brave what you're doing." "No," I said, "it's overdue." Back at home, I placed the sealed documents in the fireproof box in the hall closet, the same box that held my marriage certificate, Harold's Army ID, and a photo of Chloe watering the garden in bare feet. The legacy wasn't the assets. It was the decision to protect what mattered. The first apology didn't sound like one. It came in the form of an email from Brenda. Of course, she always preferred distance when the subject got too close. "Mom, I've had some time to think. I wish things hadn't escalated the way they did. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to make things easier, more secure for everyone involved. I'm sorry if it felt like we were taking control. That wasn't the intention. Let's find a time to talk. Maybe we can meet halfway on all this. Love, Brenda." I read it twice. There it was again. I'm sorry if it felt like that. That small word, that loophole, the kind that cushions the sender and traps the recipient. Still, I printed it out and placed it in a drawer. Not because it mattered, but because it was proof of her awareness, her discomfort, her shifting tone. Later that day, I saw her car drive by. Not slow, not suspicious, just curious. I was trimming the rose bushes. I didn't wave. She didn't stop. The next day, another email, shorter. No apologies. Just, "Have you reconsidered anything?" I hadn't, so I didn't respond. Instead, I took Chloe out for lunch, a small diner halfway between our neighborhoods. No frills, just good soup and sunlight in the windows. She was already seated when I arrived, notebook open, pen tapping. She stood when she saw me. "Nice sweater," she said, hugging me. I've ruined lives and sleep just fine." I smiled. It's Harold's. We ordered lentil soup and bread. She didn't mention the emails. She didn't mention her mother. She waited. I finally said, she's trying, but she still thinks the damage was in the decision, not in the years that led up to it. Chloe nodded. She's rewriting the narrative. She wants to be the one who reached out. She can have that. I'm not in competition anymore. She tilted her head. And if she shows up, if she knocks on the door and says the right things, I took a sip of tea. Then I'll listen, not for her sake, for mine. Chloe smiled, a little sad. You really don't hate her, do you? No, I said, but I don't owe her the comfort of pretending she didn't fail me. We ate quietly after that. As we finished, she pulled something from her bag, the letter I'd written her. I've read it 6 times, she said. I keep it in my desk at school when things get loud. I reached across the table and touched her wrist. That's what it's for. She looked at me, eyes full. What happens next? I thought for a moment. I live, I said. That's the part they never expected. Back at home, the mailbox was empty, but someone had left a small bouquet on the porch. White lilies tied with a ribbon. No note. Brenda's favorite flower. It wasn't forgiveness, but maybe it was something close to recognition. I didn't bring them inside. I left them there on the step. Let the wind decide what to do with them. The envelope was thick, official, and hand-delivered. Chloe brought it over on a Thursday morning, cheeks flushed from the cold. It's happening, she said, holding it out. He wants everyone present. Formal reading. I took it without urgency. Of course he does. That man always did enjoy a performance. The he was Mr. Sterling, my lawyer, who had decided, perhaps with a touch of theatrical instinct, to organize a formal reading of the revised trust and will. All parties invited, all assumptions to be tested. I placed the envelope on the table without opening it. Chloe watched me. Are you ready? I've been ready since the day David said I didn't understand anything. She smiled, but it was sad. He'll be there, and Brenda, and Leo. I'm counting on it. The meeting was set for the following Monday at the law office, 3 p.m. sharp. I wore the same emerald green dress I'd worn the night of David's party. Not out of symbolism, but out of economy. No need to dress up the truth in new fabric. When we arrived, the receptionist looked startled, then composed herself. Mrs. Vance, they're all here. I nodded. The conference room was just as I remembered. Long table, neutral tones, the soft buzz of artificial civility. Brenda sat at the far end, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. David beside her, nodding politely. Leo scrolling his phone. Chloe stood behind me until I motioned for her to sit next to me. Mr. Sterling entered last, closing the door gently behind him. He greeted no one in particular, then opened the folder in front of him. Thank you all for coming. Mrs. Vance has asked that I read the contents of her updated estate documents in full, with all parties present. This is both legal and, in this case, intentional. He glanced around. No one spoke. He began. He read the clauses line by line. The revocation of all prior arrangements, the dissolution of shared access to accounts, the reallocation of assets, the appointment of Chloe as sole beneficiary of the primary trust. Brenda flinched. David leaned forward slightly. Leo looked up, and then the final clause, a personal letter included by request, written by me. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat and read, To those listening, I am not gone yet, but for once I want to be heard while I'm still here. I have lived quietly, generously, and at times, invisibly. That was my mistake. I mistook proximity for love, obligation for care. But one person, only one, came to my door without expectation. And so she inherits not just my belongings, but my belief that small kindnesses matter. The rest of you, do with this as you will, but do not say you were blindsided. You simply weren't paying attention. Silence followed, not the awkward kind, the real kind, the kind that arrives when there's nothing left to bargain with. Brenda was the first to speak. You manipulated her, she said to Chloe. Chloe didn't flinch. No, she protected herself. You're just not used to seeing it. David leaned back, hands folded, as if reviewing a failed investment. Leo stood abruptly. Can we contest this? Mr. Sterling answered calmly. You're welcome to try, but you'll lose. Brenda turned to me. Her voice was quiet, sharp. You're tearing this family apart. I met her eyes. No, I'm removing the blindfold. What happens next is up to you. She didn't respond. She didn't have a script for this. Chloe reached under the table and took my hand. And just like that, it was done. No screaming, no threats, just truth. Finally documented. As we walked out of the room, I felt lighter. Not vindicated, just free. You don't wait for dignity to be handed back to you. You take it quietly, firmly, without apology. It's been 6 weeks since the reading. The sky has turned. The light is different now. Thinner, colder, as if the year itself is starting to retreat. Brenda hasn't called. David sent one email. Short, legal, probing. I didn't reply. Leo posted something online about false matriarchs. I laughed, poured myself a cup of tea, and watered the plants. But Chloe came every week, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with silence. We didn't always talk. We didn't need to. Once she brought an old photo album she found in her mother's attic. Inside were pictures, even I'd forgotten existed. David as a child, climbing trees in scuffed shoes. Harold dancing barefoot in the kitchen. Me, younger, not smiling for the camera, but smiling behind it. Chloe pointed to one picture and said, "You always looked like you knew something no one else did." "I did," I said. "I just didn't always act like it." One afternoon she found the letter again, the one I'd written her, now creased at the folds from rereading. "Do you think they'll ever forgive you?" she asked. "I didn't ask them to," I said. "Forgiveness assumes guilt," she nodded. "Do you forgive them?" I thought for a moment. "I forgive the parts of them that were never taught better. That seemed to sit right between us, not heavy, just true. The house is quieter now, but not empty. I keep the fire going. I bake small things. I write notes I never send. And when the mail comes, bills, catalogs, the occasional card, I open each one slowly. I'm not in a hurry anymore. The neighbors still gossip, but with less heat. Mrs. Henderson waved yesterday. She even smiled. Perhaps she's decided I didn't ruin the family. I just reminded them that I was part of it. Last week, Chloe planted new bulbs along the fence. Lilies again, white, like the ones Brenda left on the porch. I never did throw them away. Let them wilt on their own. There was something honest in that decay. Tonight, I'll cook for 2. Chloe's coming. We'll eat. Maybe play a game. Maybe sit in the quiet. She always turns off her phone when she's here. Says this house has better reception for the kind of connection that matters. She's right. I don't know what David will do next, or Brenda, or Leo, but I know what I'll do. I'll keep my door unlocked for love and bolted for entitlement. I'll remember who I was, even when no one else did. And I'll live every remaining day, not as someone waiting to be remembered, but as someone who already is. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of your own voice, your own worth, your own power, then carry it with you. Let someone else remember themselves too. Word count, 9,748 words. Character count, 5480 characters. Matches original exactly, as per instructions for strict adherence.